Hi everyone, I'm back with another Lessons from an Old Quilt, and we're gonna look at, let me get it up here, this beauty. This is an Ohio Star quilt. It's incredible, and it has some really cool features that I think you're gonna be interested in, including that it's not perfect, which is my favorite kind of quilt because it shows that you can still make beautiful things and maybe not have your points dead on. This quilt was purchased at an auction. I paid $60 for this beauty. It is 75 by 75 about, and I just love it. I think it's from the 1960s, but you're going to see as we take a closer look why that may not be true and some clues that are in this quilt. I also have a blog on this quilt, and I go into a little bit more detail about it. There are some pictures that you can look at it. And I have a block tutorial on this Ohio Star block coming up that you can check out, and you'll get to see how to make this exact block. So let's get started taking a closer look. Okay, so let's take a look at this quilt. We're going to start with the blocks, and they are set on point. And it is the Ohio Star block, but you can see how the maker turned it onto point. I'm going to turn it the way the block was made, and then I'll talk about the setting squares and everything. So let's turn this so you can see. I'm just going to put the cardboard thingies here so you can see it really well. This is the Ohio Star block, and I go into a little bit more detail about this block on my blog. There's a little bit of a history about it. It's just a great block, and it is basically a 9-patch. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 blocks, and these are typically solids, like they are. So we have the color here, but this is your background. You can play with this. There's so many different variations of this. This is the traditional look of it. I guess you'd call it traditional. This is an hourglass block. So there are 4 hourglass blocks and then 4 solids, and then the middle, which is, in this case, the same as the legs of the star. And it gives this really great look. Now, when you're setting a quilt on point, like this maker did, you have every other block, in this case, is a solid. And this is a really great place to showcase, let me move that over so it's in frame, to showcase quilting if you want. It's a nice spacer, and you can put a block in here too, but when you have a limited number of blocks, which may be what happened with this maker, this is a great way to extend and make the quilt bigger. It also just gives your eye a place to rest. Let's talk more about these fabrics and the block itself. I'm going to put this back on this way the quilt is, which is on point. So about half of the blocks are solids and half are prints. They are all brightly colored, so we see purples, there's other reds, there are some darker colors like this black gingham up here, but overall they're bright colors. There's this one block that is a little weird, which is over here. And it is a print. It is brown and orange, which doesn't seem to go, but sometimes adding that adds a little bit of interest. The maker might not have had a lot of choices with fabrics. I realized this. It was probably limited. It could have been old clothes. It could have been anything, but still, I think this is really, really cool. Now, they are all cottons, but there are some different weights of fabric. So this one, for example, is a seersucker. There's another one that's more of a canvas, but I do believe they are all cottons. All right, so let's talk about this background fabric. It's a muslin type fabric, but it looks like the maker ran out because, let me move it up here. We see, especially with this block, that the background is different. So you can see it is a lighter color. Now, I don't know if this was a repair. I don't think it was, just because of the quilting, but it could have been. Or the maker just simply ran out of the fabric. And this is probably a really great time to talk about the wonky blocks. The blocks are not pieced perfectly. They are all hand-pieced, however, which I find interesting, but they're still a little bit off. This is probably one of the worst, if you can call it that. Not the greatest in technique. I'm not sure what to call it. Because it is still such a cool quilt, but you can see it's wonky. It's not exactly on. We see that even with this neighbor next door, this orange block, it's off. And maybe it was somebody who was learning, maybe not, maybe this maker just didn't care. But we as modern makers, this may have derailed us and made us put this in our UFO pile. I know it may have done that to me. So I kind of get that, and I have such a respect for the maker for finishing this quilt when they aren't perfect. Such a huge lesson we can learn. While we're over here, one of my favorite blocks is the sailboat block. He's upside down, but he's so cute. I love this one. So let's talk about the quilting. Again, we're seeing big stitches, and they're not even and they're not straight. And in no way, shape, or form am I coming down hard on this maker at all. I love this because it really gives me permission as a new hand quilter trying to do hand quilting to not be perfect. But one thing that's really cool, and we've seen this on other old quilts, if you've watched some of my other videos, you can see all of the pencil lines where the quilting lines are. I love that too, because it gives such a history to this, and I don't know, it's just so cool. Now the condition is good, not great. There are some stains. We do see some holes, but overall it's pretty good. I only saw one block, which is over here, that was kind of faded. You can see some fading in this one, but overall it's in really good condition. So let's talk about this binding. This is interesting, and you can see just how wide this binding is. There's a 1.5 inch reveal on this side and a 1 inch on this side. And if you were to go around this entire quilt, it's about 25 feet of this binding. So it's a lot of fabric. This much fabric, using it like this is so interesting to me because this maker must have had a bunch of it, right? And I am so surprised that so much was used up in the binding. It is also completely hand done. It's sewn onto the front and then hand tacked to the back. And you can see it's not a super tight stitch. You can really lift it up. And in one place, I'll show you in a minute, it really lifts up and you can even see the batting, which is going to give you a surprise too. The maker did miter the corners. You can see that here. And it's really pretty. I love that it's an off-white, but it has these bright colors that picks up the bright colors from the quilt in it, and it just kind of ties it all together. So the backing is one big piece of fabric. There are no seams in it, which tells me it must be maybe a sheet or something like that. I guess it could be yardage, but it is one big piece. It is lighter than the background fabric on the front. Let me show you. You can see the contrast. It could be the same fabric and just age from the front would have caused all of this yellowing, but who knows? You can also see the block through it, and you can feel how the batting, which is cotton, has kind of separated a little bit, but not as bad as some of the ones that we've seen in the past. There are a few minor stains, but nothing major, and you can also see all of that wonderful quilting. So let's talk about the batting. If you lift up the binding, you can see the cotton batting, but here's one of the coolest parts. First of all, look at how bright that color is. Isn't that incredible? This binding was stuffed with extra batting, probably because the maker didn't exactly sew this to the edge and just stuffed it so it was full. I love that. I mean, how many times have we bound a quilt and we're like, oh, I didn't quite get all of the binding in. And I know some people cut it off after and do all that, but this is just such a great way to do it, you know? It's like, let's just fix that by stuffing the binding with extra batting. And yes, I will repair that and sew that down so it doesn't come out, but I love that. I love that. It's such a cool surprise with this quilt. Love it. And I know I said that the coolest part was the binding was stuffed with batting, but this is really the coolest part, I think. There is a signature embroidered on the corner of this. And this is the only reason I think that this may be dated later or maybe even put together later, because I think this is a D and maybe a J. Let me know what you think. And I think this is the year of 80, maybe 1980. That it was put together. Now, the fabrics definitely are older, so it makes me think that maybe it was put together in 1980. What do you think? I'm not sure what this symbol is, and I tried to figure it out. I even asked on my Facebook group. Nobody seemed to really know for sure, but there's some wonderful theories out there, so go check that out. So as you know, I like to pick 3 lessons that we can learn as modern makers from this maker, and this video is no exception. However, on my blog, I do have more lessons that you can learn from this, although there's probably even more than what I have down. I'd love to hear in the comments what you think you could learn from this maker. So let's get started with the lessons I chose for this video. The first lesson we can learn is setting the quilt blocks on point. And there's so many good things about doing this. First of all, it changes the entire look of the block and it gives you a really interesting perspective on it. Also, it makes quilts bigger, so if you have a limited amount of blocks, you can make a bigger quilt with it, which is what I think maybe the maker did here, although I'm not sure. The next lesson is something I've talked about before, but I think it's really worth repeating, and that is that perfection is overrated. And we can see in this quilt that there are wonky blocks, there are big stitches with the quilting, there's the pencil lines, there's just different things that we notice in this that maybe isn't perfect, but it's still a beautiful quilt. Love the look of this. I think it's a very soft looking quilt, even though it has those bright colors. It's just a great quilt. Another lesson we can learn is from that wide binding. I know a lot of people struggle with bindings, and I could argue that using a wider piece would make it a little bit more doable because you're not finicking with small pieces trying to get that seam encased. I like that it is a beige background, so it kind of blends in with the background, but it still has that pop of color that we see. And probably my favorite part is that big surprise where I saw that the maker stuffed it with extra batting. As always, I hope you enjoy taking a closer look at this quilt and just studying this beauty. It's such a great quilt. I love it so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.